So hello again. My name is Natalie, and I'm your moderator for this segment. This forum is hosted by the Associated Students of Western Washington University's Office of Civic Engagement. Our goal is to activate students towards becoming informed and involved participants in the political system. For everyone here live, you can still submit additional questions that you have for the candidates that may be answered at the end. Simply find and click the Q&A button in the options bar to submit a question. This segment of the forum is for the Whatcom County Superior Court judges, positions 2 and 4. I will be speaking with candidates Evan Jones, James Erb, David Freeman, and Jim Nelson. So thank you all so much for being here. We're going to start off by giving you time for a short introduction. And let me just get my timer going here. Okay. So you will each have time for a 1 minute and 30-second introduction. Mr. Jones, you can go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. And boy, I'm excited to be here talking to Western. It's late in the campaign, but I was happy to get the invite and sure excited to be here to talk to the students. I have a big connection to Western. So I'm an alumni. I graduated from Western in 2005 with an economics degree after growing up in Bellingham and Whatcom County, and then lucky enough to attend Western. So I can sympathize or understand students on campus. I lived on Billy Frank Jr., rode the bus up and down the hill to school, waited tables over in Fairhaven to get myself through school, and did what I think a lot of you are doing. So I come from that community. So I'm happy to talk to you. I attended law school in Seattle University, and then headed back to Bellingham to begin my legal career. I started in civil practice through the City of Bellingham Attorney's Office, and then had the opportunity to prosecute cases in the misdemeanor court, and before moving over to the county, where I prosecuted cases for the county. And during that time, I also had the opportunity to be in private practice, where I handled civil law cases. I was also a judge pro tem during that time, so I have experience in both criminal, civil, and judicial. And I'm excited about the opportunity to be on the Superior Court bench, where I can keep doing good work for the people of the county.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right. Next up, we would love to hear an introduction from Mr. Erb.
Thank you, Natalie, and hello to the Associated Students of Western, and thank you to the Office of Civic Engagement for hosting this forum. I'm excited to be here. I've been practicing law in the public sector for over 15 years, representing state, tribal, and local governments. I've handled each type of major case that comes before a Superior Court judge, whether that be a serious criminal case, a family law matter, or a civil legal case. My experience and the breadth of my experience has earned me qualifications and ratings of qualified from 7 state and local bar associations, is in fact well qualified from 4 of those bar associations. And I'm really excited about this opportunity to serve our community from the bench and to work on some of the issues around justice reform that I've been talking about now in our community for several years. In addition to being a practicing lawyer, I'm also a husband and a father to 2 young boys who were born here in Bellingham and attend public schools here. And my wife and I enjoy being active members of this wonderful community that we call home. We serve on the boards of nonprofit organizations. We contribute to organizations in town, and we volunteer our time in order to make our community a better place for everybody. I'm excited to be here, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, next up, we'd love to hear from Judge Freeman.
Hey, thank you, Natalie. My name is David Freeman, and I'm your current judge for Whatcom County Superior Court Department 4. Like Mr. Jones, Western is my alma mater, and I am really excited to be talking to the students at Western. I loved my experience at Western. I was a poli-sci major. One of the things I loved most about Western was the engagement that students had in both politics and the local community, which I found refreshing in a university that students were actively engaged. I've maintained friendships from that and still have the support of people like Dr. Damani Johnson and Dr. Todd Donovan still today. I loved Western so much that I came back to Bellingham immediately after law school. And I've been practicing here in the community for 15 years now in public service. I've also been an active member in our community. Like Mr. Erb, I volunteered my time with the board of directors addressing issues of homelessness. I also was a volunteer guardian ad litem for children in dependency cases where I represented the best interests of children. And for the last 10 years, I've been acting as an administrative review judge or a substitute judge throughout Whatcom County, all of the municipal courts, as well as Superior Court. I've been rated exceptionally well qualified by our local bar and 4 minority bar associations, and I have support amongst a number of community leaders. I hope I can count on your support as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And for our last introduction, we would love to hear from Mr. Nelson.
Hello, Natalie. Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Nelson, and I'm running for Whatcom County Superior Court Position 4. I have 31 years experience working as an attorney. I've done prosecution, and I've done defense. I've done public defense as well. I've also done landlord tenant cases. I've done divorces. As an attorney, I've represented parents whose children were taken away by CPS, and I've represented children whose were taken from their parents by CPS. I've been also worked in the Court of Appeals. I've had several published cases, decisions that I was the attorney on in the Court of Appeals, and many more unpublished. I've also had cases in the Washington State Supreme Court that I argued before. And I think a couple of those decisions were published as well. I also have experience in the United States Supreme Court. I've worked in Whatcom County, of course, but also King County, Snohomish County, Skagit County, and Island County. So I have a lot of experience. I've had well over 1,000 trials and hearings, and most of those in superior courts. I like to think that that the most important thing that I've done is to work with citizens. I think
Excellent. Thank you all so much. All right, so let's just jump right into our questions. For each of these questions, you'll have 1 minute and 20 seconds. So I'm going to reset my timer here. And we are going to start by hearing from Mr. Jones. So the question is, what actions will you take to improve Whatcom's justice system?
That's a great question, Natalie, because there is work to be done. I think we can all appreciate that and know that about what justice needs to look like in our community and what it can look like. So I have quite a bit of experience in our local courts and in our Superior Court, but also in the other courts in our county. So I've been able to experience firsthand some of the things we can do better. And what I think needs to happen immediately is that we need to have a bench. We need to have judges that are active in the community and talking to the people, because the concerns are real and the concerns need to be heard. So one of the things that I bring to this candidacy and would bring to the position is that I've been a teacher. I teach constitutional law at the community college, and I've done that for the last 9 years. And so I've been out there in the community talking to students and talking to regular people about how justice can be done better. And so I want to continue that. I want to continue bringing issues to the people, getting feedback, and putting into action things that I hear that need to be done different. So being out in the community is something I would bring immediately, and I think an improvement that we can make. Judges need to be visible. Justice needs to be transparent, and I'd add that.
Thank you. Next up, we'd like to hear from Mr. Erb, and if at any point you need me to restate the question, please just ask.
Thank you, Natalie. There are a few things that I would like to do to improve our local justice system if I'm elected to this important position. Judge Deborah Garrett, whose position I'm running for, has been serving on the county's Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force for several years, representing the judicial officers of the Superior Court. And if I'm elected to this position, I would volunteer to take her position on that task force to work with the other stakeholders here locally to make improvements to our justice system that are sorely needed. For example, I would want to work with them to increase access to the county's therapeutic courts, both its mental health court and its therapeutic drug court, to make sure that individuals with these health issues are receiving treatment for those problems rather than being punished for having those problems. I also want to work with state and local officials around bias issues to reduce implicit bias and to make other improvements to our justice system to promote equal justice for all, because I think that's critically important. We've seen, just a groundswell of support over the past few months for those types of positive changes to our justice system. So there's no shortage of work to be done, but I'm excited to get started to do it.
Thank you. Next up, Judge Freeman.
Thank you, Natalie. First, I'm going to jump off of what Mr. Jones said, and I do think that judges play an important role in educating the community. One of the first things I did, literally my first day, was sign up for a program that puts judges in the classroom and talks to students about the judicial system. And I think it's important because it oftentimes, whether it's adults or kids, the justice system can be very intimidating. And I think the more we educate, especially directly from the bench, the less intimidating the system can be for people. So I think that is definitely important going forward. I also think that judges have an obligation to be actively participating in systems that are meant to lower barriers to justice and supporting programs such as law advocates here in town that provide low cost or no cost legal services and advice. As a personal note, somebody that's legally blind myself, I'm somebody that wants to evaluate our current accessibility to the courthouse for those of different abilities. That's very important to me. COVID-19 has made us change the way we do business. And one thing that I would like to see is what aspects did we change that actually lowered those barriers that we can actually maintain in the future. And finally, I'll say that I think Mr. Erb is going to have competition on the Incarceration Reduction Task Force. That's a conversation my colleagues and I are having right now. So,
thank you. And finally, Mr. Nelson, what actions will you take to improve Whatcom's justice system? It looks like you're muted, Mr. Nelson.
How's that?
Perfect.
Well, I bring the experience of working in 5 different counties with 5 different Superior Court systems. And there's a lot of things that I think we could use improvement on. And one is improve access. And this was mentioned by one of the other candidates, improve access to treatment courts and to improve the treatment courts as they are. Right now, we have a drug court. And that is essentially the rules are made by the prosecutor's office. And but I think that those courts could be used to much better put to much better use by the public. And I think that unfortunately, although the prosecutor has complete control over it, a judge does have power of persuasion and is able to persuade people to kind of lighten up. Sometimes the requirements for getting into drug court are too dear, as well as mental health court. Mental health court is really being underutilized in Whatcom County now. And of course, family treatment court. I've had experience in all these courts, and I know how well they work. And I know that it's very, very important that we use them.
Thank you so much. On to our next question. When it comes to interpreting the law, do you prefer to interpret based on specific wording or understood intent? And we're going to start with Mr. Erb on this question.
Thank you for this question. I think it is the job of every judge who is sworn to uphold the law to discern and ascertain the intent of the legislature when they are interpreting the law. Judges are not lawmakers. We have a very specific constitutional system and order in which the legislature writes the laws and the judges say what the law is. So it is not the role of a judge to write the law. That being said, I do not consider myself to be an originalist or a strict constructionist of the Constitution. I do not agree with that approach to jurisprudence, and that is not my judicial philosophy. I do believe that we need to start with the text. We need to apply the plain language when it is clear, and when it is not clear, we need to apply the tools of statutory construction that have been developed in our common law system over many years to reach the appropriate and just result with due consideration for the impacts of those decisions on the litigants before you and also on the litigants to follow. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Judge Freeman, we'd like to hear from you next, please.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm going to echo a lot of what Mr. Erb just said, actually. I think it's important to remember our role as judges. We are in a co-equal branch of government, and it's important to remember what our duty is in interpreting the law and not making it. And that includes interpreting the law as it is, not how we personally would like it to be. So I'm not sure I have I would say, preference as far as how I interpret the law. It's another thing to keep in mind is that we are the highest trial level court. So we're using the tools that have been given to us by the appellate courts as well when interpreting law. So we do, as Mr. Erb said, we first look at the language and see if it's clear and whether the intent can be immediately identified based on the plain language. And if it's not, then we have a series of different tools that we apply looking to try to ascertain the intent of the legislature. And whether that's looking at legislative history or the statutory scheme as a whole, these are all resources that we have as judges to reach a fair and equitable decision and in interpreting the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. So this question asks about interpreting the law. It specifically does not mention or ask about constitutional interpretation. But as to interpreting the law, the state laws must be specific and easily understood so that the public knows what is being allowed or what is being prohibited. The public is presumed to have a constructive knowledge of the law because they have access to the written statutes. So there must be a rigorous adherence to the text in the law. I think the public shouldn't need a lawyer to understand the everyday statutes that govern our everyday lives. And the statute has to be clear and unambiguous and easily understood from the wording and the grammar, so that the citizen can read the statute and understand it. And also that law enforcement can read and understand it as well. So interestingly enough, there's a Court of Appeals case where the result turned out a misplaced semicolon because the placement of the semicolon changed the meaning of the statute. The court interpreted the statute strictly based on the wording and the grammar, which is what I think they should do. A situation where a citizen and law enforcement are required to understand the legislature's intent and adjust their behavior to do their jobs accordingly is simply not workable. Thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, Mr. Jones, go ahead.
Thank you, Natalie. So I've spent a lot of time talking about this. Week 4 every quarter at the community college in my law class, we talk about the role of the judge and the role in the court system. And as has been said a couple times here, it's true. The role is something quite a bit different than the legislature, and it needs to remain that way because litigants need to know that when they enter the courtroom, they're going to have a judge that isn't going to dictate his or her opinion, about how things should be, but instead will be operating under the same law that the litigants, the people that are there, you, me, everybody that comes to court, is looking at. So they need to know, for a basic sense of fairness in the courtroom, that the judge is operating under with the same words that they're looking at, and you have access to justice that way, and you have fairness that way. So it's real important to me, and I talk to students about that and hear their opinions on it. I think I heard Mr. Erb say that he'd look for the intent of the legislature, and I disagree with that. When the legislature makes laws, legislators come from all different constituents and all different backgrounds, and they support a law or they don't. The judge's role is to look at what the words are of that law and to interpret those words, not try to guess at the intent, because what happens there is you end up as a judge putting forth your own intent, and that's not fair to anyone.
Thank you. So for our next question, what actions will you take to remove structural inequities and discrimination from Whatcom's justice system? We're going to start with Judge Freeman on this question.
Thank you, Natalie. I always like to start my answer. This is a question that comes up pretty regularly. And as a starting point, I look to the Supreme Court, and they put a letter out a couple of months ago that kind of gave us a roadmap. And I don't bring it up just because that's what we are to do, and that's the end of the story. I bring it up because I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the fact that our Supreme Court took action on this and actually identified things that we could do as a judicial branch to address this. First of all, we have to admit that systemic inequalities still exist in our system. That's just a simple starting point. We have to be willing to challenge our own systems. I think COVID has been has forced us to do that in a number of ways, to challenge, form over function sometimes. And I think that's a good thing, because it's made us uncomfortable and it's made us willing to change how we do our business. I think we have to be self-aware and self-educating. I've been doing a lot of reading by way of audiobook the last couple of months on these issues. And I think that's an obligation we have if we're going to be part of the solution. We also have to work with the people who are directly affected by this and lift up their voices and consider their input, because I'm not going to have all of the solutions here, and it's going to have to be a community-based effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we'd like to hear from Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Natalie. Removing structural inequities and systemic discrimination from our system of justice is imperative. This question has come up in some form or another in every forum. And the fact that this question even needs to be asked is a pretty strong indictment of our legal system. I think that judges need to take a role of overseeing what goes on in their courtrooms. I think the judge must be required to act whenever he or she sees an injustice occurring right in front of their very eyes and ears. A society based on justice depends on courts achieving just results. So who is in charge of what goes on in the courtroom? Who has the powers of contempt? The judge. If the judge doesn't do something to stop systemic injustice in our courtroom, who will do it? When a judge sees an unrepresented or an underrepresented person being taken advantage of, the judge must do something about it. When a judge sees someone with authority abusing that authority, the judge should do something about it. But the judge must be able to speak truth to authority without fear or hesitation. That is why we need judges who are completely independent from the prosecutor, the police, the mayors, the council members, all government officials. So when we ask the question, who is in charge? What goes on in the courtrooms? The answer is the judge. And who is in charge of the judge? We want that answer to be absolutely nobody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Natalie. So this is, probably the most important question in this campaign, and what we've all been talking about, all four of us candidates. The judge has a role to play here, and it's a significant one. So, I part of what I've done in my practice up until this point is I've been a trial lawyer. So I've been in court. I've been involved in jury selection quite frequently, where we talk with potential jurors about issues of bias and systemic racism, and we hear that it exists, and we hear that it's felt. by the people that come into court. So the judge presides over those functions like jury selection and has a role to play in enforcing that all parties, whether they be the accused or civil litigants or juror members that are coming to court, know that it's a fair place where rights will be respected for everyone, the public and those accused of crime. And the judge is in a position to enforce it against the lawyers that are there, and enforce the court rules in general. So I would take that seriously as a duty of the judge. I've seen it and I know what those rules are. I understand case law like Batson and general rules that require fairness in all those processes. And I would take that very seriously if I were elected judge.
Thank you. Finally, Mr. Erb.
Natalie, would you mind just repeating the question for me, please?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. What actions will you take to remove structural inequities and systemic discrimination from Whatcom's justice system?
Thank you. And so I agree and echo with what the other candidates have already said, that this is a critically important issue. And especially, over the last few months, as I mentioned earlier, following the tragic murder of George Floyd, the issues of systemic racism and injustice in our justice system have just come to the forefront. And multiple actors are talking about it, including, as Judge Freeman mentioned, the Supreme Court justices of the Washington Supreme Court. And so, I am excited about working with leaders and people of color in the justice system now who have brilliant ideas about things that we can do and concrete steps that we can take to reduce structural racism and injustice in our system. And so I want to work alongside those leaders, listen to them, and help them as they lead the way towards a system that really provides equal justice for everyone. And one of the specific things that I think we need to do is I think we need to eliminate peremptory challenges. So I would like to work with the State Rules Committee on that important work, because I don't think it's possible to pick a jury that is unaffected by implicit bias.
Thank you all for your answers on that. Next question. What actions have you personally taken to address your own implicit biases? And we're going to go ahead and start with Mr. Nelson on this question.
I've experienced what it's like to live their lives, Natalie. I work with people every day from every minority group, people unjustly jailed, legal and illegal immigrants, people with mental illnesses, and people who are homeless, and people whose sexual identities are different than my own. I go to the shelters, I go to the jails, the Washington State mental health hospitals, I go to their homes if they have one. If not, I go to wherever they are. I meet with their families and their friends, their counselors, and anyone else who can help. I'm down in the trenches with them, doing whatever I can to help them. My life is about helping them and trying to give them a voice in our legal system. Unfortunately, there are many people who couldn't care less about them, and many of them work in our criminal justice system. I try to let those people know that we improve our lives. If we improve the lives of the most disadvantaged people among us, we cannot help but improve our own. If you want someone who believes that the solution to every problem is to just make more laws and lock people up, then I'm not your man. I believe in restorative justice. I have lived with these people. I would live with these folks that have been prejudiced against. And so that's how I've learned to understand them and not have those implicit biases of my own. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next on that, we would like to hear from Mr. Jones.
So addressing my personal biases and has been a constant conversation over the last, the last several months. It's been a conversation that I'm having with myself, but then my colleagues in the legal profession and community members also. So I've been thinking a lot about it, and I understand that's a significant first step in what I can do to address my own biases. Because of my background as a teacher, I'm also given the responsibility of being in charge of all the training in the Whatcom County Prosecutor's Office currently, and we've been doing concrete and significant things to address our biases, including my own. We did a training before Judge Montoya Lewis left Whatcom County. We did a training with her about implicit bias. We've scheduled just another that I'm real excited about through the Chuckanet Health Foundation. And these are just conversations that are necessary and to engage in, and I'm doing that and feel strongly that not only I should do it, but others in the system that are given by the people so much power over others. We need to be fully honest with ourselves, and so I'm trying to do that. I'm engaging in trainings. I'm taking them seriously. I'm reading on my own. I'm just reading now this Breaking Rank, a book by Norm Stamper, who's an ex-police chief in Seattle, and these are all important steps.
Thank you. Next, we'd like to hear from Mr. Erb on addressing your own implicit biases.
Yes, thank you for the question, Natalie. And, I think it is critically important to recognize that we all carry with us implicit biases. And so, that is the first and most fundamental step. And educating ourselves around what those biases may be for each one of us, and learning the tools and the skills to make sure that our decision making at all times is as free from bias as possible. And so attending the trainings is great, and talking to some of the leaders who put on those trainings to learn from them directly is also helpful. Reading some of the books that have been referenced and listening to them, as Judge Freeman said as well, to educate yourselves further. One of the things that I'm most proud of in my campaign is to have earned the support of a wide coalition of people in our community that truly reflects the diversity of Whatcom County and of our community at large. And I think that is critically important, to actually meet with folks and leaders of color, to hear from them directly about these issues and the things that we can do to be allies in order to reduce some of the problems that plague our system.
Thank you. Final response for this question, we would like to hear from Judge Freeman.
Thank you, Natalie. First of all, I think we all would like to think we don't have biases. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter what your background is, it doesn't matter who you've worked with, we all do. And the problem with implicit bias is that it's something that's subconscious. It's something that we're not aware of when we're doing it. And that's why it's something that we have to constantly be working at. And they can change over time as well. And I think that's also important to note, and why it has to be an ongoing conversation with yourself as to identifying those things and make sure that they don't affect your decision making as a judge. Objectively, I've taken training as a review judge for implicit bias. I also took training when I was a volunteer guardian ad litem. I had the opportunity to take Raquel Montoya Lewis's training. Justice Montoya Lewis puts on an amazing training on implicit bias. And I think it's important to note that I did that in part because I think bias can appear differently in different circumstances. And my work as an administrative law judge might be different than my work as a guardian ad litem. There are difficult situations for me that I know I have to guard against allowing certain biases come through. Mental health cases are very difficult for me. And I have to step back and I have to look at every side and every angle to the argument and make sure that I am ruling based on objectivity and the facts presented, and I'm not allowing any kind of bias to slip in, essentially. Thank you.
Thank you. So on to our last prepared question for this segment. Impartiality is a hallmark of any judge's position, yet impartiality meets barriers when dealing with the power dynamics of wealth, class, race, and more. How do you intend to be impartial without inadvertently supporting those with the most institutional power? Mr. Jones, we'd like to hear from you first on this.
I think this is all about one of the most important things a judge can do, which is to listen, and not assume that they know the answer, or assume that anybody who's in front of them knows the answer, but to listen to everyone and to truly, truly listen. It's something that I think I'm good at, and I think I would bring to the bench and continue to do, is to truly listen to everyone in the courtroom, to never treat those in front of you as a statistic or as a case, something that you want to move forward and move on from, but really to do the hard work of looking people in the eye and understanding what brings them to the court, and the background that's there and needs to be understood in order to make an impartial decision, and the right decision, because it's so important to everybody in the courtroom and to the community at large. So I think to stand up against power structures is as simple as looking everyone in the eye and seeking to understand exactly what they're saying, and to listen to them. And that's what I'll do. I make the commitment that I'll never assume an answer, but will seek to understand what's being presented in the courtroom.
Thank you. Next, we would like to hear from Mr. Erb.
Yes, I think this question really gets to the heart of one of the differences between the candidates for position 2. And when it comes to judicial independence, one of the things that I think the voters have recognized is that, who should pick our judge? Who do we want to pick our judge? And so in this particular case, my opponent has been endorsed by the Whatcom County prosecutor, by the county sheriff, by I think every police union in Whatcom County. And so, when it comes to questions of independence, the voters have to ask themselves if they're going to be comfortable with that scenario. If they're walking into the courtroom, or a family member or a friend is walking into the courtroom, will they be comfortable with the judge on the bench being somebody who has been selected and endorsed by those people within our justice system who wield an extraordinary amount of power? And so, I think that that's something that I've had conversations with community members about throughout this campaign, and they've expressed their reservations to me about that. And so I think that's a question that the voters are going to have to decide in this race. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we would like to hear from Judge Freeman.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm going to use Mr. Erb's comments as a jumping off point, because I'm already anticipating that Mr. Nelson will be addressing this. So one of those things that, that Mr. Erb talked about as far as endorsements, in that race, Mr. Jones has endorsements from law enforcement. Mr. Erb has endorsements from Chief Dahl with the Bellingham Police Department. I have endorsements from law enforcement and from prosecutors. I also have endorsements from defense attorneys, from social justice leaders in our community. And frankly, I am very proud of the broad support that I have. Both Democrats, Republicans, both parties have endorsed me, because I think it's reflective of my 10 years of experience being a judge for everyone in Whatcom County. Getting back to the actual question here, I want to recognize that as a judge, our decisions can have disproportionate impacts on certain groups based on power dynamics. $500 bail can be nothing to someone that is making over $100,000 a year. Yet it can be the difference between awaiting trial while sitting in jail for somebody that is, or being released on conditions for somebody that is unemployed or homeless. So I think we have, as judges, have to recognize the power dynamics and the effects and the disproportionate effects our decisions can have on populations. So I think we have to be very careful about that and work to address it as a system-wide issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Nelson, we'd love to hear your response to this.
Thank you, Natalie. As I said before, I've worked for 31 years in this in the legal system, and from early on in my career, I made a decision that if I ever ran for judge, I would not seek endorsements from elected officials, and I have not done so here. And I'm also paying for my own campaign, because I know, I'm certain, people talk to me about it all the time, that contributions and endorsements result in bias and a lack of fairness in the courtroom, and that everyone who appears in court are victims of this unfairness, whether you're a rich or poor, young or old, Republican or Democrat. I decided not to seek endorsements because many of my clients over the years have expressed doubts that justice is even possible for them. They've asked me, how can I get justice here when the judge has received campaign contributions and endorsements from the prosecutor, the sheriff, and the police guilds, et cetera, et cetera. And judicial appointments are poison to our legal system. Judicial endorsements are a poison to our legal system. Here in Whatcom County, the prosecutor, who files several thousand criminal and civil cases every year into Superior Court, along with the sheriff and the police guild, is endorsing my opponent. They are trying to pick who will be the judge to hear a substantial number of cases that they file. The Washington State Supreme Court recently wrote in a letter to the members of the judiciary and the legal community. Too often in the legal profession, we are bound by tradition and the ways that things have always been. Endorsements in judicial elections are one of those things that have always been, and make no mistake about it, they are about politics, influence, and control, and are never about identifying the better candidate. It's time that we eliminated them and let the candidates run on their own merits alone. There must be a bright line separating the judge from the party and their attorneys, and that line must never be crossed.
Okay, thank you all so much. So we have just 1 minute left, and we do not have enough time to take questions from our viewers, unfortunately. But I would love to give each of you just 30 seconds, a strict 30 seconds to give just a final closing statement to have a little bit of closure to this very involved conversation we just had. So Mr. Jones, you can go ahead and start us off, and I will put 30 seconds on the clock for you.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. So I'm really looking forward to I'm really happy to have had this conversation. Looking forward to the support if you're willing to support me for this position, because I care deeply about justice in this community and all communities. But this is the community I'm from and grew up in, and I hope that I'm given the opportunity to work hard for the people. You know, I've done a lot of work in my career, in the legal career here, and I'm supported and endorsed by people that know me, and they support me because of the things I've said tonight. No other reason. They're not trying to pick who's in charge, but they're trying to let the voters know things they know because they've spent time with me.
Thank you.
Thank
All right. Sorry, I know 30 seconds is so short. Mr. Erb, you're next.
Thank you. You know, I'm excited about this opportunity to serve our community going forward. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I've spent my career in service to the public, working on behalf of state, tribal, and local governments. I've never had a private client. I've always worked for the people. And if I'm elected to this important position, I promise to work as hard as I can to be the best judge in Whatcom County and to promote equal justice for everyone, because that's deeply important to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Nelson, go ahead.
Thank you. I think the two most important things that the voters need to look at in this election is independence and experience. And I've already talked about independence. I won't go there again. But experience, I have 31 years experience in this job as compared to my opponent's 14 years. But I have also worked with people that are disadvantaged. I've sat at council table and next to people who are having the worst day of their lives. And you have to have that experience to be a good judge.
Thank you so much. And finally, Judge Freeman.
Thank you. Being in front of a judge and being a judge are two different things. As lawyers, we're trained to be advocates. As a judge, we have to set aside that advocacy and act and decipher what the law is, not what we want it to be. I have 10 years experience being a judge, which is 10 years more than my opponent. I am giving objective facts to the voters, including my ratings of exceptionally well qualified by the local bar, and the fact that I'm endorsed by every Superior Court and District Court judge in Whatcom County and my predecessor, Raquel Montoya Lewis. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, that's all we have for this segment. Mr. Jones, Mr. Erb, Judge Freeman, Mr. Nelson, thank you all so much for joining us. For everybody who is watching right now, if you'd like to learn more information on any of these candidates, I'm about to drop all of their websites in the chat right now. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And then next up, my co-moderator, Stefan, will be speaking with the candidates for Washington's Secretary of State position. We'll be ready to get started in just one moment.